Welcome to Addiction Kitchen, where we serve up time-tested solutions from our 38-year recipe for recovery. Whether you're an addict, a family member, or simply someone looking for hope and direction, we've got something on the menu for you today. So pull up a seat and let's chat, because the best conversations happen around the kitchen table. Today's special on Addiction Kitchen menu is called Courtroom Musical Chairs. Rich Amari, an attorney, had a life of success. And then the wolf in sheep's clothing called cocaine knocked on his door and paid a visit. His life crumbled, and he called Fresh Start for some help. This is a great story of never giving up. So pull up a chair and let's chat. I'm just, first of all, I'm real thrilled that you're here doing this. Thank you for driving all the way over from Rockledge. Yeah. That's a drive.
It's an hour. Yeah, it's an hour. I got a little, I remembered why I moved away from Orlando. As soon as I hit 408,
yeah,
that traffic is like backed up, and I'm like, holy cow. And I left plenty of time because I expected that might happen.
It's nuts. I find that every patch of dirt that they can throw 15 houses on top of, and then 2.3 cars on top of every house, it's just no hope.
It's not like that's not going on over in my neck of the woods also, because it is. I where I live in Rockledge is right at the entrance to Vieira. I don't know if you know
Sure,
Vieira.
I do. Yeah.
Well, it's a burgeoning, sprawling, developing place.
Yeah.
And they're same thing. They're throwing up houses and apartment buildings everywhere they can. New restaurants coming in.
Yeah.
So, but it's nothing like Orlando.
Yeah, it is crazy. Now, all of a sudden, everything is kind of moving to the outskirts, or Lake County and different counties, to where, my son just bought a house out in Eustis on Black Bear Golf Course. And the houses are spread out. There's a lot of space.
Yeah.
You've got maybe another 5 minutes to drive at the grocery store.
Yeah.
But still, they're developing out there like crazy.
Is that where you are, Jeremy?
Eustis.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I've been up towards Eustis because I went to look at a project up that way, and it's real pretty. I think finances are what push people out of the cities because prices become so ridiculously high here.
Yeah.
Especially younger people just can't get a house. So, for example, my condo in Rockledge, which you could buy for less than $400,000, you couldn't buy for $600,000 here.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
You've been out there for how long?
I moved July of 23.
23. Okay.
Yeah.
And where did you grow up?
There. I grew up in Merritt Island.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. So you're a Florida boy.
Oh, yeah. I was born in Fort Lauderdale. Moved to Cocoa Beach with my father in 62 when I was 5 years old.
Wow.
And
You're a youngster.
I've spent all my life mostly in Brevard County, with the exception of 2 years when I went to Clemson University. And I was 15 years in the St. Pete area.
Is that right?
Yeah.
How did you hear about Fresh Start?
My daughters, and this might come into the podcast, but my daughters, they found me wandering, they being the police, found me wandering in the parking lot of a hotel downtown St. Pete, speaking gibberish. I mean, I couldn't tell them who the president of the United States was. It was Trump. I thought it was Reagan, but I couldn't even remember Reagan's name. And I couldn't tell them my address. I mean, my mind was that far gone.
Wow.
And so they put me into a mental health unit in a hospital. They Baker acted me. The police did. And I was there a few days. By the time I was able to call my daughters, I was making calls to my daughters and to my good friend Mark Peters, who's a lawyer that I work with now, but we've been friends forever. I was making calls to them, and they all were able to determine that my mind was gone.
Wow.
I wasn't in reality. I was not making sense. Mark puts it this way. He calls me Richard. Richard, you couldn't put two words together that made any sense. And they became so alarmed by that that they all got really involved in my recovery, helping me, because they were worried that I was just not going to live. I wasn't going to make it. They didn't know if my mind was going to come back. And so my 3 daughters primarily, with the help of my ex-wife, researched, and they knew of my faith. And so Fresh Start Ministries is what they came up with. And they told me about Fresh Start Ministries, and I looked at it, and I agreed to come here. That's
Wow.
the story of how I got here.
Well, before we get into kind of how your life was while you were here, and the reason I really wanted to bring you into the podcast was I wanted to talk about kind of your experience here at Fresh Start, but also your experience in our aftercare facility, Sober City.
Okay.
But tell me a little bit about your life before Fresh Start and what led up to you finally being here.
Sure. I was. My father was a lawyer. My mother was a businesswoman, and as a young boy, I thought it was a functional, normal family, just like everybody else's. What I didn't come to realize, it was very dysfunctional. My father was gone all the time working. He was also a real estate developer, gone all the time working. My mother was in business as she was gone, and we were raised, my brother and sister and I, by a nanny. And so my father died when I was 12. My mother remarried a year later and pretty much moved out. And at that age, I was left to run. And it was a time of sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Sure.
But I had discovered at that point in time that I had a gift of intellect, and that was what I used to form my identity around.
Sure.
And so I had a desire from the age of 12 to be a lawyer and a real estate developer like my father. And then I met the woman that would become my wife. She was a girl when I was 14 and she was 17. We married when I was 16.
Wow. Is that right?
Yeah. And so and so I propelled, even though I got into drinking, more drugs are my story than drinking, but drinking is a part of my story. Even though I was introduced to that and partied at a very young age, my desire to propel and succeed materially in life overtook that. And then I got married, and so really my focus was go to college, go to law school, start a business, succeed. And early on, I learned that I couldn't do that and then get involved in drugs because it was assigned to me early on. So pretty much I stopped doing the drugs, and that became my direction, and had what many people would consider a great deal of success. At 24, I was practicing law. At 26, I started what was, with one other guy, we started the nucleus of what became the largest law firm in Brevard County.
Wow.
So we had 18 lawyers and 51 employees.
Really?
Yeah. By the time I was 48 years old, my partner and I were developing subdivisions, condominium projects on the side, outside of the law firm, and practicing law, and I was engaged like full-time. Our firm had become known as the law firm. Judges would send clients to me and to us, and other lawyers would hire us, and they would send their clients to us, and we had that kind of reputation. Like, that's the firm. Public defenders wanted to come work for us. The state attorneys wanted to come work for us. It was just an amazing reputation. And but by the time I was 48 years old, I was so resentful and angry at everybody. My expectations of others, and my wife wasn't the wife I wanted her to be. My partner wasn't living up to his end of the deal, and I was working 60 to 80-hour weeks, and he was taking the same compensation I was, but he wasn't coming into the office. I just was angry and resentful and prideful and arrogant and hurting inside. But I know this in retrospect. I didn't understand it then. When the opportunity came and a suggestion was made by somebody going on a trip to the Bahamas with my wife and I, hey, maybe a little bit of cocaine would make this trip nice. That my wife was as miserable as I was.
Wow.
And we talked about it, and we thought, it might be fun this time.
And you hadn't dabbled into drugs until 48.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah. And so she and I found ourselves within 2 weeks smoking freebase cocaine. every night. I couldn't go to work. If I went to work, I was falling asleep right in front of clients at the table. I would pass out, and I would wake up, and they would be looking at each other in horror. Or I'd be on the phone having a conversation with a client, and then they'd wake me up. Rich, are you there? Or I didn't show up. So it was a horrible crash, and that was the beginning of the end.
Man.
But it took a while to unravel. Like 5 possession arrests for felony possession arrests. I'm still not a convicted felon. Somehow, I mean, I know it's God, that kept me away from being convicted. But I've spent a total of 9 months in jail 1 year, and after the 3rd arrest, my partner, because we were high profile.
Yeah.
So Amari of Amari and Theriac getting arrested was big news, and so he was trying to save face. And he locked the doors and locked me out of the office and said, I'm taking over the office, which he couldn't do legally because we were 50-50 partners.
Wow.
But I'm like, well, you want it, you can have it, because it gave me a license to just run and gun, which is, the rest was sort of history.
Yeah.
And I ended up, at the end of it all, wandering in a parking lot. It brought me to Fresh Start.
Man, oh man. So what's your relationship with your partner, that partner now?
It's not much. He was very, very angry with me.
Yeah.
I mean, extremely angry. Spread as much. I mean, there was a lot of gossip about me. He would, like, clients would, and much, it wasn't true, but he really, to build himself up, he really needed to push me down.
Yeah.
He did. Yeah. Whether he needed to is a different question. So clients would call and ask for me, and rather than saying he's no longer with the firm, we have another lawyer here that can handle the work if you'd like, he'd say, oh, Rich is a crackhead, and he's not here to do the work, but we have somebody else that can,
Wow.
And but he was very, very angry. Over the years, we had to work out, because we still had businesses together, real estate deals together, and we separated and we worked those out. I did do night step work with him, and he says he's over his anger and over his resentment. I don't know whether he is. I hope he is.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But we talk very occasionally, and when we talk, it's very civil. It's
right?
Good times.
Yeah. So you find Fresh Start, and you drive up in your Infiniti QX30. You're large and in charge, but it seems like at that point you're like, okay, I'm surrendering.
Well,
Do you feel like you were there at that point?
Correct this a little bit. I find Fresh Start, I have no vehicle.
Okay.
All
right.
So, I'm getting around just like the rest of the guys. But I think Jeremy was like, if you remember, I think it was not even a couple months by the time I was able to buy the QX30. I had the money to do it. I had the license.
All right.
Pastor Tim was putting the brakes on me having brakes.
Yeah, right.
But finally I got
no gas pedal for you. Yeah.
So I had a QX30 early on, and so you see that happening, of course. So at Fresh Start, I had to go through a sequence of, I'm only here to get control of my money back, because that's how my kids wrestled me in here. They got control of my money, and I couldn't have got $5 if I wanted to. I'm only here for that reason. So my plan, even though I lied to Pastor Tim, he says, you have to make a 1-year commitment. And I said, well, what happens if I leave in here? He goes, we're going to let you go. It's not like we're going to keep your money or anything. That's all I needed to hear. Yeah. Okay, I'll be here for a year. But my mind is, as soon as I convince my kids I'm all right enough to have control of my money back, I'm going to get access to my money back, and I'm going back to St. Pete. That was my plan. But I was only in here 2 or 3 weeks when I realized I'm where I need to be. God brought me here, and he's going to help me. And so, quickly I went from, I don't want to be here, I'm going to leave as soon as I can, to I need to be here.
Yeah. And
so I went through that transition. But then, yes, the QX30 came, and I'm working. I had an office downtown Orlando. I had to convince Pastor Tim of that, because I'm not in it. I'm not like most guys here. I'm not going to work and being accountable. I'm going to an office that's part of a large office that I'm renting space in downtown in a high-rise.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty quickly, and I'm driving over to to get involved in my real estate development over there and back and forth. And so it was that transition was difficult during that period of my time here at Fresh Start because I was really getting sucked into the world, but I had this as an anchor to come back to.
So what was it that was there a transitioning point that you remember going from I'm just here to mark time to get control of my money into I really need this? What was that turned that
I
table?
can pretty much pinpoint. It didn't take long. The first couple of weeks I was here, what it was mostly was sitting in a room with 60 to 70 other guys at the Circle Up at dinner and listening to the prayers, listening to people stand up and say, this is going on with me, and Jesus saved my life, and now I'm a believer. Now I have faith in Jesus, and people standing up and asking for prayer for themselves and for their family. And I was really moved and touched by how lives were being changed, and then I just came to realize that my life needed to be changed like that. And that was the turning point for me.
A lot of these guys, they'll get into, 1, 2 months, maybe 3 months, and they're like, I've been clean for 3 months. I've got this.
Yeah.
I don't need anything else. What is it that kept you in the program and not think that?
I think it's because, first of all, my history with recovery. I had previous attempts at recovery. I've been to other recovery programs. I had at one point 7.5 years clean, and before I got here, and so I had that experience enough times relapsing to understand that that it was my thinking that would take me back out. And so even though to answer your question differently, I guess I would say I knew enough about my addiction to understand that many times before I have had that thought, I've got this.
Yeah.
Now I'm okay. And that's really all I needed to do was to be away from the drug long enough to get my legs from underneath me. So I had enough experience in addiction and recovery by the time I got here that that I recognized the thinking as I had the thinking, and I recognized that I had the thinking, but I also recognized not to trust it and to trust more the process that I saw going on here.
Yeah. So what would you tell the guy that's here 3 months, 6 months, 9 months? What would you tell him that these are the thought process you're going to go through, and here's how you handle it?
Well, I would say, at the very beginning, the thinking is going to be, what can I do to get out of here?
Yeah.
How soon can I get out of here? And so to recognize the danger of that thinking, that's just my thoughts, trying to really, I didn't recognize it at the time, but it's my thoughts just trying to get me, because I didn't like what I was feeling, to get me back to where I could. I didn't think I want to go use drugs. I just think I want to leave and get back to my life. But really, it was the way my addiction was trying to get me back to my drugging. And so to recognize and look out for the danger of that thinking, and to understand that my thinking is not trustworthy, And so just to surrender, I would say in the first part is the importance of the surrender and the necessity of stay.
Yeah.
Just stay and listen.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing is try to listen more, than think or talk.
Yeah.
Maybe just listen.
Yeah.
And that's early on. And then as I start to feel the changes coming on, from 3 to 6 months, it's more about pay attention to the teaching and throw myself, I would recommend to them, throw yourself into the journaling process and pay particular attention to the journaling process, because what that did for me in that period of time is it taught me how to communicate with God. And really, one of the major changes for me here at Fresh Start was that I started running for exercise because I started putting on so much weight eating the food that James was cooking.
Yeah.
That, frankly, vanity, drove me to exercise. And so I started running for exercise. And every day I would run 3 to 6 miles. And by the end of the run, I was so wiped out, I would go to the end of the dock out there, the far north dock, and I would sit at the end of the dock, and I would just, stretch, and then I would sit there, and after a while in that sitting, I recognized God connecting with me. I understood being with God in that moment, and to having what it really meant to have a personal relationship with God, because God was there communicating to me, and I was hearing from him in the whispers and the small voice and the quiet voice, and just being still with him, being still and knowing his presence was with me. That was probably the major thing in my life that I still do to this day. That combined with my journaling is really what keeps me going. But so building that relationship in the 3 to 6 months is what strengthened me by the time I got to the 9 months, where I had perhaps more of a tendency to start thinking, I need to go get this going out here, because I got this going out here and I need to get to that now. And I recognized that thinking where the world and the thoughts of the world were starting to drag me away. This is starting to become routine,
Yeah.
And I've gone through the inner healing. I've dealing with inner healing, which, that's uncomfortable anyhow. So that kind of tries to get you out of here, because you're dealing with the things inside that you've dealt with since childhood.
Yeah.
And, so I don't know if that answered your question.
No, yeah, very much. Expand a little bit on the journaling process. You talked about that a couple times. If somebody's home thinking, I might need a program like this.
Yeah.
Prepare them for what that thought process is for journaling, because not everybody journals, nor has everybody been exposed to that. So how would you prepare them for that process and how to embrace it?
The journaling process itself? Well, it's a very specific process, right? And I didn't make it up, and I don't even believe Fresh Start made it up. I think its roots come from Dunklin, and but it's taught a specific way. And I guess the easiest thing to understand about it is it's much like in a way like making brownies. If I give you a recipe to make brownies, and I say, look, Scott, if you follow this recipe, all you have to do is follow the recipe. You don't need to understand it. You don't have to get into the chemical compounds behind it and try to figure out which chocolate is best and so forth. You just follow this recipe, and at the end of the day, you're going to have good brownies. All right. So journaling for me was much that way. It was set out as a process, and the process didn't have to make sense to me. I didn't even have to particularly like it. I just had to do it. Okay. And so in the doing of the journaling, and it has an order, right? So follow the order. It's important that I write down what I'm grateful, because writing the gratitude list first puts my mind and attitude in the right place to become humble to hear from God, rather than thinking I'm responsible for all of this. I recognize God's in charge of all of that, and He's in it for me, you know. And so the gratitude list, and then understanding where is it in me that my thinking has created, my irrational, distorted thinking has created feelings that are uncomfortable. Anger and resentment and fear is a big one for me, or fear. I'm fear-based by nature. So this fear, and understanding how it's those uncomfortable feelings that I want to run away from, which my solution has been drugs, right? So understanding that, just confessing, Lord, today I have this fear. And so it's the process. And then, from confession, of course, forgiveness, and then getting to the point where you ask the question. Yeah. So that process it's biblical. God actually creates the process. If you don't have to understand that even. You just need to do it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this episode is brought to you by Commercial Equity Partners, a market-leading commercial real estate firm based in Orlando, Florida. They specialize in office, retail, industrial, and land brokerage services for both domestic and international clients. And with millions of square feet brokered and strong relationships with investors, landlords, and local governments, they bring unparalleled expertise and cutting-edge technology to every deal. At Commercial Equity Partners, integrity, strategic planning, and sound business principles are a foundation of success. Learn more at cepadvisors.com or call David at 407-701-4400. I think of somebody in your position before you came to Fresh Start, and you had authority. You're making big decisions. You had people that were looking to you for those answers. How difficult is it for you to, one, surrender that authority and be accountable?
Very difficult.
How do you deal with that?
Because in my mind, I was large and in charge.
Sure.
Not God. It was me. I was the one that was directing the show because it seems that way. Now, that's not the reality of it, right? But the lie was that it's up to me and that I need to do this. And from a very young age, as I've explained, I figured out what I needed to do to make things happen. Yeah. And that naturally propelled me into a leadership role. I didn't necessarily seek leadership, but I found myself naturally being propelled and lead people looking to me for the answers, right? So it was not, by nature, it was not easy for me to look to other people for answers. I always looked within myself for the answers. So being accountable to somebody else was not something that came naturally to me. And if in my mind I determined this is what I want, then my nature is to think I've figured it out. And the closed-minded and grandiosity that's in me by nature says to, I say to myself something like this: I figured this out. I'm smarter than you. Or if I'm not smarter than you, you just haven't thought it out like I have. Mm-hmm. Or you're not capable of getting there. That's an arrogant, egotistical way to think. But that was my nature of thinking, and it's still to some extent there. So when it comes to authority, why would I bow to anybody else's authority? Sure. Who hasn't the ability or have thought it out as well as I have? Sure. And as far as God's authority, if I didn't have the faith and understanding that I have today, and look, to be totally straightforward and honest, I don't trust God in everything all the time. Mm-hmm. I would love to. And I ask him, give me more faith, Lord. Help me to lean on not my own understanding, but in everything, lean on your ways and to trust you, and give me faith to do what I don't want to do, to recognize when my will is not your will, because I need that strength, because my human nature kicks against the good. Sure. But so it's by nature difficult for me to surrender to authority, and my human nature fights against it. And the only solution that I found to that problem is read the Bible every day so that it gives me right thinking, and spend time in silence and solitude with God every day, going through the journaling process. That solves the problem of my tendency to not want to bow to authority.
Wow. Well, that's strong. Yeah. You've had degrees, licenses, accolades. How does all that compare to making it 12 months into a program and finally graduating from Fresh Start?
It's funny. When I got here this morning, I had to use a restroom. And I walked in the bathroom, and the first thing I noticed is the toilet and the baseboards. The reason I noticed the toilets and the baseboards is that was my first job here at Fresh Start. I had to clean them. Wow. So
a little humbling.
Coming from a place where I hired people to do that sort of stuff and would never touch the stuff that got down there because I was above it, right? Yeah, yeah. To a place where this is what I had to do to be able to stay here. Mm-hmm. It was quite humbling. You know, what I learned, what God showed me, I would have to say, through everything I've just described, through the process of Fresh Start and what I learned here, but not just the intellectual knowledge, but doing the journaling and spending time with God, meditating, and everything coming together, it has transformed my value system, and it continues to transform what is important to me. It doesn't mean, you know, I still like to make money. I still enjoy business. I still like the intellectual challenge of the legal practice. Though I've lost my license to do that, I'm blessed to be able to do it underneath the license of a lawyer for him. I like that. I enjoy it, but it's not my purpose in life. Tuesday evening, I went into Central Florida Regional Facility at the prison and got to spend a couple hours with inmates there who can't leave, you know, and I was able to share my path with them and give them hope. And I'm trying to get approval to go into the jail in Brevard County, and I sponsor people in AA. And I have great relationships with my youngest daughter and her kids and her family are going to spend spring break with me next week. They're coming to spend, you know, awesome. I'm there every holiday. I'm there. My oldest daughter, who wouldn't talk to me for years, we just texted back and forth each other. I mean, we have a great relationship today. My ex-wife and I are on good terms. So relationships have changed. Mostly my relationship with God is there where it wasn't. And those things are what's most valuable to me today. But I also understand it's a day by day. You know, I have to get. So I have to get up and do it again tomorrow. I can finish a 3-mile run and feel really good, and then I realize I have to do it again tomorrow. And the same is with my relationship with God and relationships with others. I have to invest in the things that are really valuable to me.
So you graduate from here, you move into our aftercare facility, Sober City apartment complex that's on the lake just down the coast.
Yes.
Not too far. What was that experience like? How long did you stay there? Do you think that was healthy for you?
Well, my initial, yes. My Sober City right around the corner. I had the wherewithal to go wherever I wanted to go, right? And I was being encouraged by my family. 2 of my daughters live close by. So I had been spending every week with them. So that became important to me. So I was being encouraged, Dad, don't move away. Stay close by. And you have this opportunity over here at Sober City. Why not take it? Again, my natural mind inclination is, let's just go wherever I want to go, and let's get back into life.
Right.
But I knew enough, first of all, to listen to encouragement from people who loved me. That they didn't want me to be at Sober City just because they wanted me to not have the kind of life that I wanted.
Right.
They knew that would be the best place for me to have the kind of life that would be best for me. And so I listened to them, and I made the decision, talked to my counselor, Mike Moody, and I said, I saw the wisdom of it. And so I just surrendered to the process again and went over there. Best thing I could have done. I mean, I stayed there 1.5 years. And I don't know if that's available today to men that go over there, but my suggestion is...
Depends on availability. But
go there and stay as long as you can.
Yeah.
There's really no hurry to get away from there. Yeah. It was a great environment. The camaraderie that I had here at Fresh Start went over there. I had that continued camaraderie. I had the benefit of having a weekly house meeting there, which I really enjoyed. And I had a dock at the end on the lake that I could spend time, and I just did the same thing that I started here at Fresh Start. Right. I continued there at the end of the dock every day when I ran.
Do you find that sometimes maybe negative feelings can creep in to you now because of you not having a license like you did before. How do you cope with that?
Yes, that absolutely happens. It comes about in a couple of ways. First of all, envy. Envy is it's an emotion that comes to me naturally. It's one of the deadly sins in the Bible, right?
Yep.
And the warning against it is there because I think I have a natural proclivity towards it. No matter how much God has given me, I have a tendency to look at the other man and say, but why not me? you know,
Right.
But look at him, and there's that lack of gratitude for what I have. I mean, what I have a tendency to look over there. But so envy is there, and I just I think I lost the question a little bit.
Well, no, it's just a matter of, I was just thinking about you don't have your license now, but yet you're seeing colleagues maybe crush
That's
deals
right,
and
that's
those kind
right,
of things.
that's
How
right.
do you cope with that?
So it's difficult. So envy is one of the problems. Another one of the problems is shame. My shame that I have. Losing my law license. That's huge, Huge. I mean, I lost it at one point, got it back, and now it's gone for good. I could get it back now, but I'm not going to take another bar exam at my age. It's just not going to happen, But in any event, I look at my people that I came up with in the practice and the wild success they have reputation-wise. The guy I work with, Mark's a wonderful, most respected lawyer who's practiced law for over 40 years. I taught Mark legal research in law school. Okay, and so I'm working for Mark now. It's humbling, but he's a great guy, and he never lords it over me like that.
Yeah.
He respects and appreciates my work, but nevertheless, there's that aspect of I look at the amazing success materially, and I think about how much I've thrown away through my drugging years, and I do look at the professional success, and to be a technically disbarred lawyer is very difficult. It's not the way I would have chosen to go out.
Yeah.
And so the way that I deal with that, because what my mind does with that is my irrational, distorted thinking would use that fact to say, see, Rich, you really aren't worthwhile, are you? You really don't have value, do you? And that's what underlies that distorted thinking is what underlies my negative, repetitive negative thinking patterns,
Sure.
right? And so how I deal with it is I understand that God's been in the midst of it all. And however it turned out, number one, is because of choices I made. Okay, and I just have to own up to that, take responsibility for it. But number two, I do understand this. We wouldn't be having this conversation. I wouldn't be sitting at a bench overlooking my lake like I do now with God every day if all of that hadn't happened. Mm-hmm. So if I had to trade one for the other, man, there's just no question.
Yeah.
I would do it all over again.
Mm-hmm.
They can have that success and whatever. That's fine. This is the route that God took me. It took what it took to get me here, and that's how I deal with it.
Wow. So you're talking maybe with somebody in prison or somebody you're sponsoring in AA, or you're just talking to another addict. What are your words of encouragement to present a ray of hope?
Well, if he can do it for me, I was arrested 5 times. I've been behind bars. Mm. I've known what it's like to have to brush my teeth when I'm told, to have to get up at 3:30 in the morning to have breakfast, to have to eat food that doesn't have a bone in it so I can't use it to stab somebody else or be stabbed. In other words, to not have freedom to walk. But more importantly, I know what it's like to be a slave to my emotions and my thoughts that have kept me captive for so long, right? And the hope that I have is a person. It's Jesus. He's real, and And I didn't go seeking Jesus. He sought me when I was there, when I was farthest from him, when I was most his enemy, you know, when I was, when I didn't want anything to do with him. So the hope is to look for the person of Jesus. I mean, the first thing is you just have to get the drugs and alcohol out of your lives.
Right.
But that hope is a person, and that person is real, and his love is real. And it's not like a vapor sort of thing, and it's not just an idea. It's a reality. Yeah. And so, the hope is in a person. It's in the truth, and in a relationship that really makes everything else right. So whether it's behind bars or not, the first time when I came to faith, I was in the backseat of a police cruiser, and I first realized that Jesus was sitting next to me, and he was going to jail with me, Wow. And he had been there the entire time. And I was behind bars when I first realized I was free for the first time ever in my life. So I was okay there inside, and I was okay here inside, fresh start, because I always knew that he's with me and he's taking me to a place that I believed what he said in his word. It was good for me,
God, that's strong. What was it like disappointing people that you loved?
At the time, honestly, at the time, I didn't care. That's the sad part now. I didn't care. I had an attitude at the time of entitlement. I worked so hard all these years. I sacrificed my life to put those Gucci jeans on you, and to give you these European vacations, and I, to my partner, I worked all these years and built all like he wasn't even there and didn't have a part in it, which is all irrational, distorted thinking, right? The sad part is I didn't care, and it's only in hindsight and retrospect that I see the damage, and I see it, and there's times it brings me to tears. And in conversations with my daughters in particularly, they're able to say to me, "Dad, do you realize that this is what we went through?" Yeah. We're watching. I don't want to out anybody else in this conversation, but we're watching a very dear, close family member in rehab right now. And the interesting part of that is to get her into rehab, they brought me into their conversation. So we did like an intervention on her and had to convince her to go. And they made me a part of that, just like when they came together to get me into rehab, they made me now a part of that. And they're like, "See, Dad, this is what it was like. What she's doing to us, not to us, but the effect it's having on us. Yeah. That's the effect your drinking and drugging had on us." And so I got an inside view of it. And it was like, I guess best to say, it was humbling to see the effect I had on others. And the partner in my law firm, the distress, 51 employees had to find other jobs, you know what I mean? Yeah. So there was a lot of destruction in my path.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you struggle with forgiveness of yourself? Or has that been a challenge for you? Has that been a road?
Yes, I would not have said yes. It's probably only more recently that I recognize that I have a degree of unforgiveness for myself. I'm probably my harshest critic. So if I just dwell on the destruction part, then I might have a tendency to not forgive myself. If I just dwell on from the heights I've fallen, the loss of my law office, the loss of the money, if I dwell on that, the damage I've done to other lives and to other people, it may be more difficult to forgive myself. But the thing that helps me is, the time I spend with God.
Sure.
And the love that I feel for Him. It just so fills me that it's hard for me to not forgive myself. And He calls me to forgive myself. He calls me to forgive. To the measure I forgive, that's the measure of forgiveness I'll feel, So I think forgiving myself has probably been more difficult than I expected it would be.
I imagine. What's your relationship, or what was your relationship with your parents?
Well, again, my father was mostly not home because as a lawyer he would work till 9:30 at night. When he'd come home, he'd fall asleep in the chair. And my memories of him, I've come to realize later that I held him up on a pedestal that wasn't there. I thought I remembered him as being an involved, caring, loving father, when in reality I've learned he wasn't. He just wasn't there. And when he was there, he was asleep.
Yeah.
And I remembered him throwing the ball and taking me out in the ocean in his arms as a young child, taking me fishing. Well, I remember those things because it happened one time each, so it wasn't really a lot of that. And I certainly had no son-to-father conversations as this is how you do life, son, which is why I decided to be a lawyer and a real estate developer, because I figured it would be a way to get to know him that I never got to know him. So that was and he had an explosive anger that scared me. He didn't show it much, but when it exploded, you scurried, and I scurried. I hid under tables. My brother would stand in front of him and take the brunt of it, which I always thought was stupid. But that was my father. That was our relationship. My mother, she loved me, but the way in which she loved me was to buy things. She didn't spend a lot of time. There was no nurturing to speak of, no hugging, loving, caressing, that sort of thing. And she bought my brother and my sister more things than she bought me. And I always thought because she loved them more. I've come to realize it's just because they demanded it.
Yeah.
And I expected it.
Yeah, right.
And because I didn't demand it, I just expected it. I didn't get, But she was a businesswoman, and she often was gone and wasn't. We were essentially raised by a nanny who herself was 20-something years old from Scotland and didn't really have a connection with us.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Did you spend any time in the courtroom?
Yes.
On both sides of the table?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's interesting you say that. Ask that question. I've tried cases. I've won cases. I've lost cases. The losses were more memorable. My first loss was for a client that I should have won. In fact, I told him he couldn't lose, and he shouldn't have lost. The law was on our side, but we lost. I told him he needed to appeal. You can't lose the appeal, and he shouldn't have lost, and we lost the appeal. So it was really humbling. I've learned never to tell a client that. You can't lose a case. Anything happened in the courtroom. One of my cases early on was against a judge who represented a large bank from Texas. He wasn't a judge, he was a lawyer at the time. And I represented some farm growers. They were orange grove growers. And it was I beat the pants off of that other lawyer, and they went away with their tails tucked. And my first arrest, he was a judge that I was standing in front of, behind as a defendant, standing in front of the judge that was a lawyer that I used to practice against.
Oh, man.
So it's been a really interesting development and direction.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, man, what was going through your head at that point?
Well, he was. It was humbling. I mean, it was difficult. It was kind of strange in a way too. I was going through. This might sound surprising to you, but I was going through a strange time of life. Like I was listening to rap and hip hop music, and I had this really strange rap song on my cell phone, right, as my answer tone. And you're not supposed to bring your cell phone into the courtroom, but I showed up in the courtroom. I was out on bond. I showed up for a first appearance, and my cell phone just blares off with this really obnoxious rap song in the midst of it all. And the judge looks at me and goes, "Amari, that is the worst answer tone I've ever heard." But there was a time when I was in front of that judge where I had been behind bars for 75 days. My lawyer, who was one of my ex-partners, wouldn't come get me out because he wanted me to sit there for a while.
Wow.
And when he brought me in front of the judge looked to my lawyer and asked him, "Mr. Eisenmenger, what are we going to do about Mr. Amari? So they're having this conversation like, I'm not even there. And Greg shook his head and said, Your Honor, I'm afraid that if you let him out, he's going to die.
Wow.
And at the moment, I just thought, my lawyer had just told the judge to keep me in jail. and he was really being more of a friend to me than he was a lawyer, if you think about it. But he is a great friend and a great lawyer. But in any event, the judge then turned to the prosecutor and asked the prosecutor the same question. What are we going to do with Mr. Amari? And the prosecutor actually started to cry. He came to tears, and he said, Your Honor, I agree. If you let him out, I'm afraid. He says, I know Mr. Amari. I've had great respect for him. I've worked with him. He's helped me in my work. And I'm afraid if you let him out, he's going to die. And that was the interchange with that judge, the same judge who was the lawyer that I had a case with. So
Wow.
it was, we've had some interesting experiences along the way.
I guess.
Yeah.
What are the two most important things in your life right now?
Well, to say God would be a great understatement.
Right.
But my relationship with God and my relationship with my family, and relationships with others, I would have to say is right on the heels. Love, love. It says, perfect love casts out fear, is what the scripture says. And I actually learned that here, that it's not faith so much as perfect love. Faith, yes, is an important ingredient, but love is what, to me, has become the most important thing. And so that love, that love, the perfect love, I've learned is a love that I can't, that doesn't come to me naturally because of my own self-interest. I tend to corkscrew in on myself, that self-centeredness. That's just an ongoing battle in me, even today. And but when I spend time with God and that love, because he sacrificed for me on a cross, that love, it just, it gets into me in such a way that it really casts out and helps me fend off the self-centeredness, and it really enables me to become more sacrificial and more giving, because it's not like I do it perfectly. I don't. Far from. It's almost as if I have two computer hard drives. Jeremy will be able to understand this. I got an A drive and a B drive, right? And the A drive is I'm operating out of self-centeredness, call it sin if you want. My B drive is I'm operating out of love and faith. And the truth is, I'm operating out of both drives at all times. It's hard to separate it, right? And only by spending time with God, am I able to go more out of operating out of the A drive rather than the B drive, if you will. So.
I don't know if we can wrap it up any better than that. Yeah. Listen, you have been such an advocate for Fresh Start, and I see your involvement, the way that the staff has talked about you, the way that just your history has been here. I can't thank you enough for that, and I'm so moved by how you've been touched by Fresh Start, and then to see you give back the way that you do, being a part of this, I'm just so thankful for that. I see we have some alumni that have have come back over the years. After a while, they just they seem to fall, but their first instinct is to call Fresh Start, and I'm super thankful for that. But I'm just so thankful that God has used you in a way to leave a legacy that is one that's life-changing. And not only for your family, but for others that you encounter. And we have a lot of respect for Rich Amari at Fresh Start. And I just, I'm so thankful that you've made the choice to make a difference and follow Christ the way that you have. It's been amazing. So I can't thank you enough for being here, man, and sharing your story.
Well, I have the same emotion. The thanks are mine for you and for Fresh Start. not platitudes. It saved my life. Coming here was exactly what I needed it when I needed it, and God did that. But you were here. The rest of the staff were here. Pastor Tim and Joe and Kelly and Mike Moody and the rest of the gang were here, and it saved my life and gave me the direction that now Christ said I came to give life and give life abundantly. And now I have that abundant life, So thank you.
Well, keep the faith, brother. Thank you so much for being here. Hey, are you interested in becoming a title sponsor of Addiction Kitchen? Reach out to us using the contact information below, and we'll be in touch. Plus, if you'd like to join us in helping others, consider donating just $20 a month at freshstartministries.com/donate. Every bit makes a difference. And if you found value in this episode, please subscribe, like, and share it on YouTube or Facebook. And don't forget to click the notification bell so that you know when our next episode drops. We'd also like to hear from you, so drop your questions or comments below, and we'll do our best to address them in the future episodes.